Welcome back, everybody, to the Octies Draft Talks channel. Today we've got my NFL Mock Draft 4.0. This one is going to be 2 rounds with trades. With the Combine now in the books and free agency kicking off in around a week or so, I figured it would be a good time here to have another mock draft. I know I just uploaded one last week, but we've had a lot of changes in the NFL with the Combine coming and going. Some players' stocks might be perceived differently now. We've got some other big moves, including the franchise tag deadline, some surprising extensions, such as Danny Dimes, or now I guess we can call him Danny Dollars. We also have the Lamar Jackson news as well, with him getting the non-exclusive franchise tag, which we'll talk about a little bit as we go through the mock draft. So without further ado, let's get this show on the road. With the number 1 pick, I unsurprisingly had the Chicago Bears trading down. It's no secret that the Bears are looking to move this number 1 pick, and reports came out during the Combine that the Bears have officially decided to build around Justin Fields and unsurprisingly had this pick on the trading block. I think Chicago wants to ensure that they can get one of the top defensive players in this draft class, so I would not be surprised to not see them move down a whole lot. And with the Jalen Carter news, that could move him down their board, and Will Anderson might be the only true blue-chip defensive player in this draft class. So as much as the Bears are going to want to add future first-round picks in a trade down, I think they're also going to prioritize looking to add a true star player, and that's what Will Anderson can be. So because of that, the Bears are only going to move down 1 spot. The Houston Texans will move up and get their franchise quarterback, Bryce Young. The Texans are going to give up a lot, but they're not going to have to give up any additional first-rounders other than the number 2 overall pick. The official trade is that the Texans will receive pick 1 along with a future 4 in exchange for picks 2, 33, which is early in the second round, 104, 201, and a future 3rd. So the Bears are getting a large quantity of draft picks while Houston moves up and gets their franchise quarterback. Houston is going to be spooked by other teams like the Colts or the Panthers or somebody else like that trying to move up to get Bryce Young. So because of that, the Texans are just going to take matters into their own hands, and they will ensure that they get their guy. Bryce Young, I believe, is the best quarterback in this draft class. I know all of the other quarterbacks dazzled during the Combine, but Bryce Young, to me, is still the guy, and I think he's somebody who the Texans can build their team around going forward. As for the Bears at 2, they get Will Anderson, the pass rusher out of Alabama. He did all the drills at the Combine, and he looked exceptional. With the Jalen Carter news, I think Will Anderson is now likely to be the top defensive player off the board. In my last mock draft, I had Anderson fall all the way to 6 because of the Tyree Wilson hype. And I could still see a world where Wilson goes before Anderson, especially depending on which team is on the clock. However, I don't see the Bears passing on Will Anderson in this scenario, getting a true game-wrecking pass rusher. I know Chicago needs a lot of help for Justin Fields. They need weapons. They need offensive line, but their front 7 was laughably awful last year, and with some of the picks they got in the Texans trade, they're still going to have ammo to acquire help for their franchise quarterback. With the 3rd pick, we've got another trade. The Carolina Panthers are moving up with the Arizona Cardinals. This is pretty similar to what I had in my last mock draft. I had the Panthers moving up from 9 to 3. Carolina will receive picks 3, 169, nice, and 213, while the Cardinals will get 9, 39, 93, along with a future 1st and 3rd in next year's draft. So Arizona is adding 5 top 100 draft picks over the next 2 years, including Carolina's next 2 first-rounders. The player that the Panthers are trading up for is C.J. Stroud, quarterback out of Ohio State. While Stroud did not put on the show that, say, Anthony Richardson did at the Combine, Stroud performed very well in the on-field drills, and I think I've really started to have C.J. Stroud grow on me a little bit because I think this is a legitimately good quarterback prospect, and I feel like he was in an Ohio State system where the play calling didn't necessarily let him cook, and he obviously had great receivers over the last couple of years. But I think the Georgia game really showed the Ohio State offense kind of letting the training wheels off and letting C.J. Stroud to command the game. And boy, did he do that. Ohio State did not beat Georgia, but that's the closest thing to an NFL defense that C.J. Stroud is going to face off against, and he performed very well. The phrase I've used for that performance with C.J. Stroud is mental toughness. I think it shows a lot of football character to be able to go into a college football playoff game against an elite defense like that and completely dominate. That's what C.J. Stroud was able to do, and for me, he is certainly QB2 in this draft class. With the fourth pick, I'm going a little bit controversial here. I have the Indianapolis Colts not moving up and instead staying at 4 to select Will Levis, quarterback out of Kentucky, not Anthony Richardson. For me, I think Anthony Richardson is the better prospect. However, I think Will Levis is the more polished passer right now. I think the Colts want somebody who's going to be able to play early. That's not necessarily Will Levis. He's got a lot of work to do. He was in a Kentucky system that, well, to put it lightly, he was dealt a bad hand, but even so, it's not like he was great last year at Kentucky. Despite that, I do think he is a little bit more pro-ready than Anthony Richardson, and it's not like Levis doesn't have a giant arm, because he does, and I think the Colts are still really going to like that. So I could see the Colts passing on Richardson for Will Levis, who's a little bit more traditional of a pocket passer, but he does have solid mobility, and he has a great arm. With the fifth pick, the Seattle Seahawks select Tyree Wilson, edge rusher out of Texas Tech, over Jalen Carter. This is the first spot where I really thought about Jalen Carter, and this is what suggests that Carter might really slip. The Seahawks are going to really like Tyree Wilson, I think. He's got good size, good length, really good character. I would not be surprised if he's the number one player on their board, period. I don't think they're going to draft a quarterback here. I know people are suggesting that. You don't sign Geno Smith to a $100 million deal and draft a quarterback at 5. That would genuinely shock me. I think they might like Tyree Wilson more than Will Anderson. He's got a little bit more size. He's got a little bit more length. And now with the Jalen Carter news, Wilson could pass him up as well. So I think Seattle's going to be really excited about this pick. And I think Tyree Wilson can be a guy they build their pass rush around. With the sixth pick, we're going a little bit off the rails again as the Detroit Lions select Anthony Richardson, quarterback out of the University of Florida, not Jalen Carter. So I know Lions fans are very torn on this. Do you build around Jared Goff or do you draft a quarterback? As a Lions fan myself, going into the offseason, I was on Team Goff. But after really thinking about it, I think it would be in our best interest to draft a guy like Anthony Richardson if he is on the board here. I'm not opposed to building around Jared Goff a little while longer, but if we can get Anthony Richardson, I think we should 100% do it. And I think given the opportunity, I believe we will do it. Anthony Richardson has game-breaking ability, and while the consistency has not been there, I do think he showed some big-time flashes of potential last year. I think he improved throughout the season. And obviously, this guy's an athletic marvel. He's 6'4", 240 pounds. He's got a cannon of an arm. His perception for me did not really change a whole lot at the combine. That's great that he can run fast and jump high, but I want to know if he can throw the football, and I believe he does have the ability to be a great passer given the right situation, like, say, Detroit, where he can sit behind Jared Goff. He's got great skill position players. He's got arguably the best offensive line in football. And he's going to be able to learn with offensive coordinator Ben Johnson for a year before he inevitably becomes a head coach. So I think this will be a perfect spot for Richardson. And as for the Lions' perspective, yes, Jalen Carter is on the board. But if Anthony Richardson is your guy, you got to pick him regardless of who is still available. I don't know if the Lions can win a Super Bowl with Jared Goff. And the way I view it is you can win with Jared Goff, but you can win because of Anthony Richardson if he develops. Looking at some of these contracts being offered to these quarterbacks, Daniel Jones just signed for $160 million. There's no reason why Jared Goff should get less than that. Jared Goff is going to ask for at least $45 million per season in his next deal, which ends in 2 years. Would that be smart for the Lions to pay? And for me, the answer is no. Yes, Jared Goff is a very good quarterback. He was arguably a top 10 QB last season. And without him, the Lions obviously win nowhere near 9 games. However, Anthony Richardson has the upside to be better than Jared Goff. A lot better, to be specific. And I think it is worth the risk for the Lions to make this move and acquire Anthony Richardson out of Florida. And if Richardson is on the board for us, I believe it would be a mistake for us not to pick him. And I know a lot of Lions fans disagree, and I get it. We need more talent on the defensive side of the ball. Jared Goff was a good quarterback last year, but I think this would be the right move for Detroit, and I think if he's on the board, he's going to be the pick. Even if somebody like Jalen Carter is still there, who slides all the way to 7, where the Raiders are going to scoop him up. The Raiders are not one to historically care about character, and I guess that trend will continue here with Jalen Carter. We haven't received a ton of new information over the last week or so with him, so I still don't really know where his stock is going to be, if it's not going to fall at all, or if he will really take a tumble. But I think he'd be a huge addition to a Raiders defense who needs a lot of talent in the front unit. I thought about him at 5 to Seattle. I kind of thought about him at 6 to Detroit, but if Anthony Richardson's there, you got to take him regardless of who else is. But I think this would be a big get for the Raiders defense. You get another dynamic player next to Max Crosby and Chandler Jones. I think this would be a really good move for them. With the 8th pick, we've got another trade. The Philadelphia Eagles are moving up with the Atlanta Falcons to select cornerback Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. So the Falcons will receive picks 10 and 94, while the Eagles get picks 8, 161, and 247. So the Eagles move up, and they add draft picks. Yeah, Howie Roseman is a wizard. The Falcons add another top 100 selection and only move back 2 spots. I think CB1 will come down to Christian Gonzalez and Devin Witherspoon. I think they're both very talented, but Gonzalez is a much more appealing physical profile, 6'2", good size, good length, only 20 years old. He was phenomenal at the combine, ran a sub 4.4. He could jump out of the gym, and he's a great cover corner as well. He was phenomenal this year at Oregon. I think he's going to be the type of player who the Eagles look to build around, and with James Bradbury gone, they're going to need another corner who can start opposite Darius Slay. You have Avonte Maddox, who's really good, but he's more of a nickel guy. So you replace Bradbury with Gonzalez, and that's a really good corner trio. So we've got a 3-part trade with the 9th pick. This is where this mock draft gets a little bit weird, so bear with me. The first part of this trade is that the Green Bay Packers are acquiring the 13th pick from the New York Jets in exchange for Aaron Rodgers. I think Rodgers' trade value is a little bit lower than what we originally deceived it as, but I still think he will fetch a first-round pick. I think this would be a home run deal for the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers is a 39-year-old diva, and you're getting a top half of the first-round draft pick for him. I think this would be a great move for the Packers. You start your rebuild. The championship window is closed with Aaron Rodgers, and as somebody who strongly dislikes the Packers, I'm really hoping this doesn't happen. I hope Aaron Rodgers stays in Green Bay, and the ship can sink with Rodgers in it, essentially. As for the Jets, I think this is too much to give up, but I understand it. Aaron Rodgers has been an elite quarterback for the last 15 years, something that the Jets have not had. They have missed on high-drafted quarterbacks over the last few years with Sam Darnold and Zach Wilson, and you got to get a veteran, so I get it. I don't know if I would give up this much for him, but I get it. The second part of this trade is the Packers moving up from 13 to 9 with the Arizona Cardinals, who acquired this pick earlier from the Panthers. So the Packers will get picks 9 and 66, while the Cardinals get 13, 45 in the second round, and 171. So the Cardinals do a double whammy. They trade back twice. They now have 3 second-round picks in this year's draft, and the Packers move up for Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa. I don't think Van Ness would fall to the 13th pick, so they're going to move up and ensure they get him. I think Lucas Van Ness is going to be a really good fit for their defense. He's the type of profile of edge rusher that the Packers like, and I think this will be a solid pick for them. He performed very well at the Combine, and I think has cemented himself at the bare minimum as a top probably 12 pick. With the 10th pick, the Atlanta Falcons select Devin Witherspoon, cornerback out of Illinois. So the Falcons move back. They add Witherspoon. I really thought about a Lamar Jackson trade here. Personally, I still think Lamar Jackson stays in Baltimore. If not Baltimore, I do think it's Atlanta. Now, the Falcons themselves have said that they're not pursuing him. That was a report that came out yesterday, and then the team's official Twitter account retweeted it, which is really weird. There is 100% something going up with this whole Lamar Jackson thing. A lot of people think the owners might be colluding against him, and they don't want to give him a fully guaranteed contract after seeing what happened with Deshaun Watson last year. I still think somebody's going to break the bank. I could see a team like Washington and Dan Snyder, who realizes he's going to have to sell the team, give the owners one more middle finger by signing Lamar Jackson to a fully guaranteed deal. I think somebody's going to do it, or somebody's going to do something close. I still think he will end up in Baltimore still, but I really thought about it here with Atlanta. Instead, they moved down, they add an additional top 100 pick from the Eagles, and they select Devin Witherspoon, who was one of the best defensive backs in college football last year. He did not test at the Combine, but I believe he is expected to at his pro day. I think Christian Gonzalez is more physical upside, but Devin Witherspoon was a little bit more consistent than him over the last couple of years, and I think this would be a really good addition to the Falcons' defense to have him parallel A.J. Terrell. With the 11th pick, the Titans select Peter Skoronski, offensive tackle out of Northwestern. He might have to slide into guard, and he'd be a really good guard. The Titans really just could use any offensive lineman of sorts, whether it is a tackle or a guard. So you draft arguably the most talented offensive lineman in the class, and you make it work. With the 12th pick, we have another trade. In one of my earlier mock drafts, I had the Seahawks moving up for a wide receiver, Jordan Addison. I don't think Seahawks fans liked it. I don't know how they're going to feel about this trade, but I think this is a big move for them. They are trading the 20th pick, the 37th pick, and the 122nd pick to the Houston Texans in exchange for 12 and 73 in the third round. And they're moving up for Jackson Smith-Njigba, the wide receiver out of Ohio State. JSN tested very well at the Combine. He did not run a 40 because, spoiler alert, his 40 time would not have been very good. But since he's a primary slot guy, I don't think it's a big deal. In the quickness drills, he tested really, really well, which is really what slot guys in specific focus on. And he did really well in the on-field drills as well. I'm really starting to believe that Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to be my wide receiver one when it's all said and done. I'm really starting to think that he is the best receiver in this draft class. And a lot of people are saying he's a high floor, low ceiling guy. And I do think he is a high floor player. I think he's going to be very good off the bat. But for a slot receiver like him, just because he doesn't have elite physical traits doesn't mean the ceiling is low. Cooper Kupp just won Offensive Player of the Year and Super Bowl MVP 2 years ago, and he didn't do it because of size and speed. Look at Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit. He's 22, 23 years old, and he's already a Pro Bowler because not of his size or his physical ability, but because of his ability to get open, his hands, his routes, and his ability after the catch with the football in his hands. Jackson Smith-Njigba is very similar in that sense. And you pair him up with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, oh boy, that is probably the best receiver trio in the NFL right away. With the 13th pick, the Cardinals, who moved back twice, they traded down from 3 to 9, then they moved down from 9 to 13, select Bijan Robinson, running back out of Texas. I don't think Cardinals fans are going to like it, and I totally understand it. The Cardinals are rebuilding. They're not going to be very good this year, so why the hell are they drafting a running back? Because Bijan Robinson is different. He is the best running back prospect over the last 5 years since Saquon Barkley. And I'm not saying I would do this, because I probably wouldn't. But I think it's going to be hard for Arizona to pass that up. James Conner's a solid player, but he's not stopping you from drafting frickin' Bijan Robinson, who could be a top 5 running back right away. He is going to elevate their offense, and once Kyler Murray comes back from his knee injury, then there's going to be a real rushing dynamic with the two of them together, and I think that would be pretty scary. So Arizona's playing the long game here by drafting a running back, which I know feels weird, but Bijan Robinson is somebody who can totally change their offense. They need somebody who can be dynamic for them, especially with DeAndre Hopkins probably being traded. With the 14th pick, the New England Patriots select Nolan Smith, edge rusher out of Georgia. Nolan Smith just feels like a Patriot. I think he's a good scheme fit. I think he'll fit the culture there. This was a pretty easy pick. I think it makes a lot of sense after his phenomenal combine performance. The Green Bay Packers at 15 select Paris Johnson, the offensive tackle out of the Ohio State University. This is an interesting pick because the Packers don't have a glaring need at offensive tackle right now, but David Bakhtiari has shown a tough ability to get healthy consistently, and it would not be a bad idea to start focusing on a long-term replacement. And with a guy like Paris Johnson on the board, that's hard to pass up. So I think this pick would make a lot of sense for Green Bay. Then at 16, the Washington Commanders select Deonte Banks, cornerback out of Maryland. I had Banks higher in the first round than a lot of other people did. Now it seems like everybody's starting to fall on the bandwagon, and I get it. Deonte Banks is really damn good, and he tested very well at the Combine, well enough to be the third corner off the board in the top half of the first round. Hometown situation, he played at Maryland. He doesn't have to travel too far. And this Washington secondary looks really solid. They've got a good safety duo of Cam Curl and Derek Forrest. They've got some good corners with Kendall Fuller and Benjamin St-Juste. And now you have Deonte Banks. That's a really good group of 5 players. It's going to be hard to throw the ball against the Washington Commanders next year with that pass rush and that secondary. With the 17th pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Joey Porter Jr. out of Penn State. He tested well at the Combine. He's got a ridiculous wingspan, and the Steelers need more talent in the secondary. I think this would be pretty good value, as Joey Porter's a really, really solid player. With the 18th pick, we've got another trade. The Detroit Lions are moving down here at the Buffalo Bills. The Bills will be acquiring picks 8 and 183, while the Lions get 27, 91, and 130. The Bills will select Kalijah Kancey, the defensive tackle out of Pitt. The Bills need more juice up front. Another guy who can get after the quarterback. Kalijah Kancey's a little bit undersized, but he tested really well at the Combine, and he's a very, very good pass rusher. Needs to be a little bit more consistent in the run game, but he can get after the damn quarterback. With the 19th pick, the Buccaneers select Will McDonald, edge rusher out of Iowa State. I think McDonald's going to go earlier than people think. He did not have a great season at Iowa State because he was used really poorly. I think he'll be a solid fit here within the Buccaneers scheme as they look to get younger with their pass rushers, and I think McDonald's going to be a good player at the next level. The Houston Texans moved down from 12 with the Seahawks, who traded up for Jackson Smith-Njigba. The Texans get DeJuan Jones, the offensive tackle out of Ohio State. He, unsurprisingly, tested well at the Combine, at least in terms of his measurables. He's 6'8", 370-plus pounds. He's got a ridiculous wingspan. I don't even remember the number, but it is really, really big. Put it that way. The Texans got to get some more protection for Bryce Young. I'm not entirely sure if Laramie Tunsil's going to stick around, but even if he does, DeJuan Jones will be a nice addition here to this offense. The LA Chargers at 21 select Dalton Kincaid, the tight end out of Utah. Probably the best pure receiving tight end in the draft class. Kincaid did not test at the Combine due to an injury, but I think he'll be ready by the time we get to training camp and eventually the season. The Chargers could use another weapon for Justin Herbert, and I think Kincaid's going to be a really good player at the next level. At pick 22, we've got another trade. The Dallas Cowboys are moving up to select Myles Murphy out of Clemson. It's a pretty simple trade here. Dallas gets this pick at 22, while the Ravens get picks 26 and 90. So Baltimore moves down a little bit, while the Cowboys get Murphy, a guy who did not perform all that well last year, but was a highly regarded high school recruit. He played very well early in his collegiate career, and I think Dallas is going to believe in the upside and look to take a swing. With the 23rd pick, the Minnesota Vikings select Tyreek Stevenson out of Miami, the corner. Minnesota needs guys who can play at corner right away. I think Tyreek Stevenson's a pretty high floor guy. He didn't test off the charts at the Combine. He doesn't have ridiculous measurables, but he's really solid, and I think he'll be a big addition to a Vikings secondary who needs a whole lot of help. With the 24th pick, the Jaguars select Cam Smith, the corner out of South Carolina. I'm starting to see him go in the second round in a lot of mock drafts, and I don't really get it. I think Cam Smith is absolutely a first-round player. He performed really well at the Combine, so maybe he will get back in a first-round discussion, but I think he's really good, he's really versatile, and he's going to be really solid right off the bat. He's a tough, physical corner who I think would be a nice addition to a Jaguars defense who on paper is really solid. They're probably going to cut Shaq Griffin, so I think Cam Smith can be a really solid replacement for him, and I do think Cam Smith ends up in the first round because I think he is that caliber of player. I really don't get why mock drafts have him falling to the second round. Doesn't really make sense to me. The 25th pick, I had the New York Giants selecting Luke Musgrave, the tight end of Oregon State. The Giants did draft Daniel Bellinger last year in the 4th round, and when healthy, he was pretty good. But I don't think he's going to stop you from getting somebody with the receiving upside that Luke Musgrave has. He's a great athlete. He tested well at the Combine. And you got to get more weapons for Danny Dallas to try to get him to succeed with his now $160 million extension. The Baltimore Ravens moved down 4 spots, and they get Quentin Johnston, the wide receiver out of TCU. I think Johnston could go lower than expected. He's just kind of a polarizing player, in my opinion. He's a big guy, not as big as we thought. I think he's only a shade under 6'3", That's what he measured in at the combine, so a little bit shorter than we expected. He's really good with the ball in his hands, but he just doesn't really know how to use his frame. So I really have no idea where he's going to end up. I could see a team taking him in the top 15. I could see him falling into the second round. But the Ravens are going to take a shot on him here. They need wide receivers in the worst way. And now they add another weapon for Lamar Jackson, who I think will be the quarterback of the Baltimore Ravens next year and going forward. Give him another weapon to throw the ball to. With the 27th pick, the Detroit Lions select Brian Branch, defensive back out of Alabama. So when I originally had the Lions trade down, I was planning to target Adetomiwa Adebawore, the pass rusher out of Northwestern. But with Brian Branch falling all the way here, yeah, you got to pick him. Brian Branch is a versatile defensive back who you can use in so many different ways. And I think Aaron Glenn is going to love having a guy like Brian Branch on this defense. I think the Lions' secondary, particularly their corners, are a little bit better than people realize. Yes, corner is still in need, but I don't think the cornerback room is that bad. Jeff Okudah was good early last year. I still am not sold on him. I really want it to work out, but I'm a little bit lower on him than others. However, the other guys I think are pretty solid. Jerry Jacobs is a legitimately good young player, and Mike Hughes is fine in the slot. I wouldn't be surprised if we sign a guy, Jamel Dean from the Bucs, I think would be a great fit within the defense. And now you got a guy like Brian Branch, who's so versatile, he can do a bunch of different things. Probably you can have him line out in the nickel. I know Mike Hughes and Will Harris have been adequate in the nickel, but neither of those guys are stopping you from picking a guy like Brian Branch. With the 28th pick, the Cincinnati Bengals select Broderick Jones, the offensive tackle out of Georgia, a physically talented tackle who's a little bit raw. I think this would be a good landing spot for him because the Bengals have both Jonah Williams and Lyle Collins, who are like solid players. Neither of them are probably going to be long-term starters, however, so Broderick Jones can replace them, say, next year. With the 29th pick, the New Orleans Saints select Adetomiwa Adebawore out of Northwestern. I think after his combine, he will go in the first round. He's a really, really good player who's really started to get some hype closer to the combine, and then he tested ridiculously well. So I think he is a first-round caliber player, and he'd be a really good fit within this Saints defense. New Orleans does need some more juice on offense, however, so they're going to trade up for the very next pick with the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles will receive picks 40, 115, and 148. The Eagles don't have a ton of day 3 draft picks, so now they're going to add some while only moving down 10 spots. As for the Saints, they trade up, and they get their new Alvin Kamara with Jahmyr Gibbs. Kamara's getting older. He showed signs of age last year, and we don't know if he's going to play early next season with a possible suspension looming after getting into a physical altercation with somebody at the Pro Bowl a couple years ago. So I don't think you can bet on Alvin Kamara being good over the next few years. You know who I can bet on being good? Jahmyr Gibbs, who is basically a faster version of Alvin Kamara. He's a great receiver, dynamic out of the backfield. Will he be as good as Alvin Kamara? I don't know, but I think he's got the chance to. And with the final pick here in the first round at 31, the Kansas City Chiefs select Felix Anudike-Uzomah, the edge rusher of Kansas State. Apparently, they're going to let Frank Clark go, and they could use another pass rusher opposite of George Karlaftis. Felix Anudike-Uzomah is a solid player, good build, good athleticism, very solid production the last couple of years at Kansas State, and I think he'd be a good fit in this defense, not having to travel too far as he becomes a Chief. With the 32nd pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Darnell Wright, the offensive tackle out of Tennessee. He's a guy who I've mocked in the first round or first round range really before anybody. So I'll give myself a pat on the back there because it does look like he will be at the bare minimum probably a top 35 pick. The Steelers could use some more help on the offensive line, get some more blockers for Tiny Hands Pickett and Najee Harris, and I think Darnell Wright would be a good addition. With the 33rd pick, the Chicago Bears are up. They acquired this pick from the Houston Texans, and they select Jordan Addison, the wide receiver out of USC. He goes in the first round in pretty much every mock draft, but here I had pretty much all the receivers other than Jackson Smith-Njigba slip a little bit. So that's sort of how the receiver board plays out with only 2 going in the first round. The Bears need a lot of help for Justin Fields. You can't really make a fair evaluation of him until you give him weapons and offensive line. They did trade for Chase Claypool last year. They do have Darnell Mooney, but you need somebody else with that group, and I think Jordan Addison would be a nice addition to the offense. He did only weigh in at 176 pounds, and he didn't light the combine on fire, but this is a receiver who's had very high production since his true freshman season. With the 34th pick, the Arizona Cardinals select O'Cyrus Torrence, the guard out of Florida. The Cardinals could use some more help with the offensive line for once Kyler Murray gets back, and now, of course, their new shiny toy, Bijan Robinson. So I think O'Cyrus Torrence would be a nice addition. With the 35th pick, I had the Cleveland Browns moving up with the Indianapolis Colts. In my previous mock draft, I had the Browns select Bryan Bresee at pick 42. I still had them getting Bresee here, but they've got to move up a little bit to get him. The Browns will receive picks 35 and 223, while the Colts get 42, 111, and 142. Bresee is a guy who I have very mixed opinions on. I think the upside is there. Another guy who is a very highly heralded recruit coming out of high school. He's shown flashes, but he's had a hard time staying on the field and being consistent on the field. He tested unsurprisingly well at the combine. We know he's a good athlete, so I think somebody's going to take a shot on him. But I don't think he's like some consensus first-round pick that everybody is hurling him out to be. With the 36th pick, the Los Angeles Rams select Zay Flowers, wide receiver out of Boston College. Again, a little bit lower than people expect. The Rams probably have bigger needs than wide receiver, but the value here is really, really good. Get another weapon alongside Cooper Kupp and Van Jefferson. They had Ben Skoranek starting games for him last year, so it really would not hurt to add more weapons, put it that way. And Zay Flowers is a really, really good target who I think Matthew Stafford is going to enjoy throwing the ball to. The Houston Texans here at 37, they got this pick from Seattle in the Jackson Smith-Njigba trade, and they select Nick Herbig out of Wisconsin. Herbig is an interesting player because he's pretty raw, but he knows how to get to the quarterback. He's a little bit of a tweener. Do you put him at edge? Do you put him at off-ball linebacker? He's kind of a hybrid in the sense, and I think DeMeco Ryans is really going to like working with him. He is a really, really good athlete, and I think the potential with him is really, really high. I think he's got a great ceiling. With the 38th pick, the Las Vegas Raiders select Julius Brents, cornerback of Kansas State. Everybody wants their next Tariq Woolen, the corner with great size. Brents is around 6'3", great length, great athleticism. Now, Tariq Woolen ran a 4.26. He's different. Julius Brents did not run in the 4.2s, but I think he is a really, really solid player. The Raiders are going to add another piece to the defense. They already drafted Jalen Carter, and now they add Julius Brents. The Cardinals at 39 select Derek Hall, the pass rusher out of Auburn. The Cardinals defense needs a lot of work. Their first two picks were on offense, so now it's time to get some help for the defensive side of the ball as you add Hall, another guy who can rush the quarterback. With the 40th pick, the Philadelphia Eagles, who moved down with the New Orleans Saints, select Tuipulotu, the pass rusher out of USC. He's a little bit of a tweener, but I do think he'll fit the Eagles scheme pretty well as sort of a 3-4 defensive end. Tuipulotu put up a whole lot of sacks last year, and I know counting stats like sacks are not the way to judge a prospect, but it's no secret that this guy knows how to rush the quarterback, and we know Howie Roseman loves adding pass rushers, especially with Javon Hargrave probably gone in the offseason. B.J. Ojulari, the edge rusher out of LSU to the Titans. This was a pretty easy pick. I think he fits their scheme well, and they need some more pass rushing. They cut Bud Dupree, so yeah, pretty easy fit of team and player. With the 42nd pick, the Colts, who moved down with Cleveland, select Emmanuel Forbes, the corner out of Mississippi State. He is very skinny. I believe he measured in at sub 170 pounds at the combine, so obviously you'd hope there's more play strength, but he checks pretty much all the other boxes. Very solid in coverage, good ball skills, tested well athletically. Will he be able to hold up with these big physical receivers at the NFL level? That's going to be the question with him if he keeps up his current playing weight. So at 43, we've got another trade. Michael Mayer falls all the way here, and the Washington Commanders are like, you know what? Let's just go up and get him. When it's all said and done, Michael Mayer will probably end up as a first-round talent in this draft class, and I don't think there are 32 better football players here than Michael Mayer. So I think this will be a home run move for Washington. They'll be acquiring picks 43 along with a future 7 from the New York Jets, who get 47, 152, and a future 6. I think this would be a great move for Washington. I think they've had a fantastic draft with first Banks and now getting Mayer. The Atlanta Falcons need some more weapons on offense. They'll acquire Josh Downs out of North Carolina. He'll probably mainly operate out of the slot. You have two big targets with Drake London and Kyle Pitts, and now you get a smaller guy with Josh Downs who's got good explosiveness, he knows how to get open, and he can make plays with the football in his hands. John Michael Schmitz, the center out of Minnesota, goes to the Cardinals. This is their third second-rounder of the day, and they're going to add another offensive lineman. They've already drafted Osiris Torrance. Now you add John Michael Schmitz, really rebuilding that offensive line. Anton Harrison, the offensive tackle out of Oklahoma, to the New England Patriots. They could use some more help on the offensive line as well. There is a report at the Combine that Anton Harrison measured in with arm length at around 31, and for a good few minutes, draft Twitter basically exploded, but then it was revealed that his arms are not 31 inches. He does not have T-Rex arms. He actually has pretty long arms. So because of that, the Anton Harrison draft stock only plummeted for about 5 minutes, and then it came back up. I still think he will go later than people expect. I know a lot of people see him as a first rounder. I'm not sure if he ends up in round 1, but I think this will be a solid pick for New England. And then the Jets at 47 select Dayan Henley, the linebacker out of Washington State. In my last mock, I had him go in the first round. I think that might be a little bit of a reach on my part. I do think he's going to go earlier than people expect. Maybe not round 1, but here on day 2, this will be a nice pick here for the Jets. With the 48th pick, the Detroit Lions select KEEANU Benton, defensive tackle out of Wisconsin. I think the Lions will be wise to add another defensive lineman. They have invested a lot of early draft picks into the D-line lately, and a lot of those players have panned out. While you have guys like Levi Onwuzurike, who is trending towards bust status because he cannot get on the field. You have Aleem McNeil as the nose tackle. He is awesome. Aiden Hutchinson, obviously, is phenomenal. And then I'm still really excited about Josh Paschal, who was drafted in the second round last year out of Kentucky. But it doesn't hurt to add another guy. I think KEEANU Benton would be a really nice fit within this defense, playing the role that we had hoped Levi Onwuzurike would have been able to do. The Steelers select Drew Sanders, linebacker out of Arkansas. This is the same pick I gave them in my last mock. I really, really like this fit. Drew Sanders is a little bit raw because he's transitioning from edge over to linebacker. But on linebacker blitzes last year, he was really, really effective, and the Steelers blitz their linebackers more than just about anybody. So I think the fit here would be phenomenal. Steve Avila, guard out of TCU, going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're adding some more offensive line help. They could use another guard. I think this would be a pretty solid pick. DJ Turner out of Michigan to the Dolphins. He ran a 4.26 at the Combine, the fastest 40 time anybody had this year. He's a really, really solid player as well. He's not just a speed demon, and I think he'd be a nice addition for the Dolphins secondary. Joe Tippmann, center out of Wisconsin to the Seahawks. They could use another interior offensive lineman, particularly somebody who could start at center. Joe Tippmann's a really solid athlete, really solid player. I think he'd be a good addition for them. With the 53rd pick, we have a trade. The Dallas Cowboys are moving up for the second time today, acquiring pick 53 from the Bears in exchange for picks 58, 176, and a future fifth. Really, really good value for the Bears, only moving down 5 spots, adding 2 fifths. But the Cowboys go up and get Jack Campbell, the linebacker out of Iowa. I think he'd be a home run pick for a team like, say, Detroit. So the Cowboys are going to jump the Lions and ensure they get him. Jack Campbell's a very high-character, tough football player who's going to be really good right off the bat. Leighton Vander Esch probably won't be back, so this is your Leighton Vander Esch replacement, essentially. Jartavis Martin, defensive back out of Illinois to the Chargers. This is earlier than you will ever see Martin go in a mock draft, but I actually think he could be a second-rounder. Tested really well at the Combine, and he's very versatile. You can have him at safety. You can have him at the nickel. The Chargers are talented in the secondary. Obviously, they have Derwin James, Asante Samuel Jr., guys like that. But they've got some other good players that not as many people know about. They have J.T. Woods, who was drafted in the 3rd round last year out of Baylor, another ridiculous athlete. But I don't think having Woods on the roster stops you from adding a guy like Martin, who you can have at safety, you can have in the nickel. Bryce Callahan is a free agent, so I think he could slide into that slot spot and end up being really good. The Detroit Lions at 55 select Darnell Washington, tight end out of Georgia. He probably will end up earlier than this, but this would be such a good pick for Detroit. I think he would be a perfect fit for this offense because I think part of the reason why TJ Hawkinson didn't really work is because he's not a great blocker. I think for the Lions offense to work, I think blocking is going to be more of a priority at the tight end position than receiving. Darnell Washington can catch the football. Do y'all see that one-handed catch at the Combine? But you're getting him for his blocking ability, and I think he does have receiving upside because he's a ridiculous athlete and has shown the ability to get open and catch the football in college. So I think Darnell Washington should go a lot earlier than this. Maybe he will, but this would be a home run pick for the Detroit Lions. With the 56th pick, we've got another trade. This is exactly what I did in my last mock draft. The Eagles moving up from 62 to 56 to select Zach Charbonnet, the running back out of UCLA. The Eagles get pick 56, while the Jaguars get 62, 148, and 247. So the Jaguars add some day 3 picks, while the Eagles are going to add a true bell cow running back to the offense, a guy who can get 20 carries a game. And I think he would be a really, really good fit here because Miles Sanders is probably gone in the offseason. The Eagles have really moved up and down the board today. They started the video off with picks 10, 30, and 62, and now they end up with none of them. But I think the Eagles made out really well today. Luke Whippler, the center out of Ohio State, goes to the New York Giants. They could use another center to plug in there and help the offensive line for Daniel Jones. With the 58th pick, the Bears, who moved down with Dallas, gets Byron Young, pass rusher out of Tennessee. He tested really well at the Combine, and I think Chicago obviously needs more help on the front, as we talked about earlier with the Will Anderson pick. Antonio Johnson, safety out of Texas A&M to the Buffalo Bills. He's a really, really solid defensive back, and I think he's a pretty versatile player. The Bills are probably going to lose Jordan Poyer in the offseason. Micah Hyde's not getting any younger as well, so I think this will be a good pick for them. Maisie Smith, defensive tackle out of Michigan to the Bengals. He could go quite a bit earlier than this, but he falls here to 60. The Bengals could use some more help within the middle of the defensive line. Sam Laporta, tight end out of Iowa to the Carolina Panthers. Get yourselves a weapon for your new quarterback, C.J. Stroud. I know they have Tommy Tremble, who they drafted in the 3rd round a few years ago, but I think Sam Laporta is a better prospect. Mike Morris out of Michigan to the Jaguars. I think he'll fit their defense pretty well. Get yourself another body inside. And then we wrap things up with Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee to the Chiefs. In my last mock draft, I had the Chiefs moving up for him. Now they get to stay at 63 and have the dynamic weapon out of the University of Tennessee. So that'll wrap up this mock draft. Let me know what you guys thought of your favorite teams' picks down below in the comments section. Make sure to like and subscribe as well. Plenty more content here on this channel over the next few weeks as we get closer and closer to the draft. So, yeah, peace out.